Well, I'm delighted to be here with Danielle Bounds, the Sales Director of ICC Wales. I recently went to a round table that she kindly organised about Martin's Law, or the more formal name for it, Protect Duty. I thought it was interesting just to try to find out some more. And I know you've got a survey and things coming up, Danielle, haven't you? So do you want to tell me, you're obviously passionate about it, and that really shone through when we met. How did you get involved?
Morning, Heather. ICC Wales is always looking for opportunities to contribute in thought leadership for the events industry. In the past, for example, we've created reports around mind, body, soul, emphasising the importance of nutritious food provisions and keeping delegates energised at conferences. Our second report to industry was about the great outdoors in terms of ancient woodland, well-being at events, and emotional well-being of delegates as well. So this year we were floating some ideas about what might be topical for the industry, and I saw that there wasn't much activity regarding the upcoming Protect Duty within the business event space. So I came back and talked to the team here about it and thought about how we could potentially educate the sector and kickstart the response. We all need to make some changes. At first it wasn't particularly well received, I think. We've definitely had to put our head above the parapet. A lot of people that we approached didn't want to kind of take that step or be involved in something in its infancy, but we really pushed it forward here because I felt so strongly about it, and that's how we got to where we are today.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah, it definitely shone through that you felt strongly about it. I know that it's sort of tabled for legislation, isn't it? Where is it up to with regards to the legislation?
So I was really pleased to see it as part of the Queen's speech at the start of the year, outlining this year's parliamentary business. So it's very much on the horizon. It's expected that it will either become law at the end of this year or into the start of 2023.
Okay, oh, so it is imminent,
It's imminent.
and I'm sure, when I came to the round table, if I'm completely honest, I thought I'm not completely sure it's relevant to PCOs, and I think some of the membership will be thinking, oh, it's just for pop concerts or those humongous events. What message would you give to the PCOs?
I think just to start that kind of education piece, really, because the Protect Duty or Martin's Law specifies that it will concern all publicly accessible locations. They refer to them as PALs. So that includes conference and events venues, and basically by extension any events that are held within them. So it's extremely relevant to everybody, because so many spaces are kind of accessed by the public. A small business event may not need the same level of counterterrorism measures as a large pop concert or even a large international congress, but it's still something that all events will need to factor into their planning and delivery. So every event will need to take the appropriate actions proportionate to the risk. So it's going to affect everybody within our industry in one way or another.
And I think that came out to me as well when we met. Is there a simple way of deciding what measures need to be taken, such as through a risk assessment or?
There is, I think, the difficult thing is when you look at something like this, especially terrorism, it sends our minds into overdrive. We think that there's this enormous brick wall that we need to scale and climb and or even break down. But actually, a risk assessment that's drawn up by a venue and the event organizer will definitely be a good starting point. We will need to await the details of the Protect Duty regulations before knowing exactly what is required. But I think if we all start operating best practice and if we all start sharing knowledge, so an event safety plan is a really good idea. Looking at your safety and security measures, these are all kind of good starting points for simple changes that we should make sooner rather than later.
And to do that in collaboration from the start so that you're not duplicating effort as well, isn't it? Because you don't want the venue doing one thing, the PCO is doing something else, and other people doing other things. So it's having that conversation, I think, isn't it? And I think there are some sort of key triggers that should make people sit up and just question what they'll need to do, the speakers, VIPs, content matter, location, numbers, to name a few. Is there a sort of a definitive list trying to make life easier for people?
I think we're all switched on people in the events industry, and I think some of it is common sense. So, if you look at your organizer control of attendees, for example, if all the attendees are registered and are known to the organizer, the risk is lower than public events where you may not necessarily know who's attending. I think considerations around the location and the venue access and any vulnerabilities. And as you've mentioned, have you got controversial speakers? Have you got key VIPs in attendance? What are you discussing? I think the really important thing is that any actions taken need to be proportionate to the risk. But we can't say that nothing is risk free, unfortunately, anymore. And if you look at terror attacks across the world, you know, they've been varying locations in various different contexts. So I think it's just kind of going through that kind of mental checklist to make sure that you've done your due diligence, really.
That's right, and I think it's sort of working out which stakeholders to get involved, isn't it? And the great big elephant in the room, who should pay for it too, for any sort of advanced measures and things. And I presume you're going to say that's when the collaborative talks sort of come into their own.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned it earlier, and I think if the last 2 years have taught us anything, it's how we should communicate. So we've all become much more open in sharing and consultative in our approach to things. And I think that's something that we need to continue. So stakeholders need to work together to mitigate any risk. The client can't do everything because the venue has a responsibility too, but likewise, the venue can't be fully responsible. That there needs to be that collaborative approach. Cost shouldn't lie solely with the venue or with the organizer. I think we'll probably see things become a bit clearer when the law comes out, but I think we need to enter into it as a partnership. We're waiting to see if the government will bring any funding to support this as well. I know that it's something that's really important to them. So there's a lot of what ifs and buts and who at the moment, but I think if we do what we do best, which is communicate and work together, then it's all going to be positive.
Yeah, definitely. And I think at the moment, as it stands, terrorism isn't included for insurance, is it? You would need to do it as an add-on, and then the insurance industry would ask you to do a sort of a terrorism risk assessment. So again, it's sort of trying to make sure that we include those stakeholders too, to help us sort of navigate through. And you've mentioned quite a lot to do with terrorism and risk and things. Have you considered how, when it comes down to it, we're trying to protect, aren't we? That's what we're trying to do, and that's sort of fundamentally the way we're coming at it. As far as delegates go, you need to do the sort of analysis of the risk, but you also need to reassure them that actually the chances of something happening are so remote. We don't want to put them off coming as delegates, do we, or speakers, or whoever it might be, to a conference. Have you thought how we can communicate this to the events industry in a way that isn't too scary?
I think that's really key. And I think, especially after the last couple of years and the disruption that we had due to COVID, we don't want any further disruption to come into our amazing industry. We want to continue running events. We want events to be well attended, and we want there to be those conversations happening again that haven't happened for so long. So it's a careful balance, and it's that kind of risk versus the reassurance. You don't want to highlight the risks to scare people, but you've put it really well, Heather. We just want to protect people. We want to keep everybody safe. Providing reassurance that steps are being taken to mitigate any disruption, and I think disruption's a really good word. It should be a positive message, and it's important to get that message across so that we can all play a part in identifying any disruption. So for example, if you've got 1,000 people attending the conference, that's 1,000 pairs of eyes that are making sure that everybody is safe. And the same way, if you saw somebody who became poorly at an event, you would look at that and you would play your part in that. I think disruption is something that we need to do, and a message we need to get across, but in that reassuring way, so that events can still happen and will still be attended.
Brilliant. And you want to send out a survey, don't you? And I will be attaching a survey when we broadcast this video. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we decided to create this report for industry, we actually surveyed clients of the Celtic Manor Resort and the ICC Wales, and we were really surprised at some of the responses that came back, and that was really the driver for continuing this path with the Protect duty and raising awareness. So we established that 77 people said that their knowledge of it was low or very low, and that there were so many questions that people wanted answered. So what we want to do now is survey PCOs and venues again and see whether any learning has increased, see what are those kind of key messages that are coming from clients and people that are at the kind of coalface of events as well. And then we can establish the next steps in terms of our strategy. So we are looking to put together a working group, which will work with the Home Office on behalf of the events industry. And we're looking to recruit people from venues, we're looking to recruit people from industry professionals and also PCOs as well to feed into that group, because what we really want to happen is that we have a voice into government, as we did during COVID. We want to ensure that we're part of any decision making that's going to happen in terms of restrictions, that we're talking about funding, that we need funding in order to implement a lot of this. So we'll send out the survey, and then we'll be looking for people for this working group as well, so that we can all educate each other, that we can share best practice, and that we have this kind of professional collaborative approach.
Fantastic. Well, I'm sure with one of our values being belonging, that so some of our ABCO members will want to be involved in that. It's such an important piece of legislation, and as you say, we want to get our voice there too, so that it's not just sort of dictated to us, don't
Yeah,
we? So
absolutely.
that it's part of the thing. Is there anything I've missed, Danielle? Is there anything that you wanted to speak about that I haven't asked you about?
There isn't, no. Just thank you really for the opportunity to continue to raise the profile of this. It's going to be a significant change to our industry. So anything that we can do in terms of education, and if anybody needs to have a conversation, whether that's on the record or off the record or whatever, please pick up the phone to me, and I can help kind of impart everything I've learned over the last 7 months as well. And I think it is just, as an ABCO member, we really value this opportunity. So thank you very much for that.
Oh, thank you for your time today, and good luck with your survey, and we look forward to seeing the results.
Thank you very much, Heather.